Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to my show. My name is Jason DaCosta. This is Consistent Preterism. I hope everybody's doing great out there. It's a new year. It's a new day. It's a new dawn. But COVID's still here, and it's kind of scary. And I don't know what to believe. You hear all these stories. Actually, it's hit close to home a few times with my friends and family, and two of my closest pals, their fathers both passed away from COVID. And that's kind of crazy because I've known these guys for a long time and they've always been, semi-tight with their dads. They both live in Vegas, both of these guys. And they, one of the fathers lived in Chicago and the other father lived in New York. And they both passed away. Now, granted, they both did have underlying conditions. I know for a fact one had diabetes, and the other had, I forget which one it is, but they both had some stuff going on. So, of course, that could be related, but still scary nonetheless, right? It's as they say, unprecedented time, along with all the other wackadoodle horseshit going on in the country. It makes international living seem a lot more appealing to a guy like me. Not that I would ever do it. I just built a huge house, got a lot going on. Things are good in the DaCosta household. However, 10, 12, 15 years, if shit were really flying off the handle here and, polka-dotted unicorns were walking around, I would probably consider moving abroad. Maybe I would live in Portugal. Maybe I would venture off to Greece. I don't know. I've been to a lot of places and I enjoy a lot of places, and I often think back and desire to be in those places. So who knows? But anyways, we are continuing on in our 100 Reasons Why the New Testament is Only About Israel series. And let's see, we are on number 13 today. And in the last series, we looked at a dagger of a text from 2 Corinthians chapter 6, where Paul talks about not being yoked with darkness and unbelievers. And, in other words, don't put yourself around these bad influences and whatnot. And when Paul does that, he quotes two passages that are extremely relevant only to Israel, right? Old covenant passages, Old Testament passages, that God would again walk with them and they would be his people and he would be their God. So he's sort of, like saying, hey, this is Israel coming back, and God is going to again be their God, and they will be his people. That was a term and a phrase that was only ever given and used by Israel and for Israel. And then he goes a step further and says, he quotes an Old Testament passage saying, come out from among them and touch not what is unclean, and I will accept you and be a father to you and receive you back, yada, yada, yada. Well, I showed how that's a perfect correlation to the prodigal son parable, because these ones who are in the nations were being called out, right? Called out from every nation, tribe, tongue, and kindred, like Revelation 5 says. Isn't that a doozy? And they were being called out and they were being gathered back in, and they were, being brought back to the Father. A picture-perfect representation of the parable of the prodigal son. Bear with me one moment, just turning in here. Okay. And so we were looking at that, and that was just a really devastating point that I think isn't referred to enough, because again, it's another place where Paul just sort of drops the hammer down and lets everybody know, like, hey, these are Israelites. There's no question. He's not applying Old Testament passages and concepts to pagans who never knew God. It's a heroic, ideal tale that comes full circle. And so we're getting the phrases like, they will be his people and he will be their God again. So clearly all about Israel. And I mentioned in that audio that in the first letter to the Corinthians, Paul actually says that all of their fathers crossed through the Red Sea and were baptized into Moses. So I wanted to get that one in here because obviously we know it was coming. There's no doubt about it. And just get it for the sake of getting it. Now, we all know it's there. It's one of the main arguments. It's a total dagger of a point. It's right there in black and white. and somehow people still argue against it, but we're going to do a quick 3 minutes on it just to make sure we get it into the series. So here it is, 1 Corinthians 10, verse 1. Paul, writing to the elect in Corinth, says this: "Moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all of our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, all ate the same spiritual food and drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But with most of them God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now these things became our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things, as they also lusted, and do not become idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play, nor let us commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 fell. Nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed by serpents. Nor complain, as some of them complained, and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages has come." Okay, so we'll leave it there. We'll stop there, and not much needs to be said, but in case you missed that, Paul is clearly telling his recipients in Corinth that their fathers passed through the Red Sea and were baptized into Moses under the cloud and by the sea. And in the sea, and so they all ate the same spiritual food and drank the same spiritual drink, and Christ followed them. Obviously, it doesn't take a genius to know he's speaking of the fathers of Israel, the Israelites, the 12 tribes. And so these clearly are descendants of the 12 tribes living in Corinth. There is no arguments. And he goes on and says all these things, their lust, their sexual immorality and everything, it was written down for admonition and as examples for them upon whom the ends of the ages has come. Now, I've said this recently. I mentioned this in a recent video a few weeks back, but what makes more sense? Were the fathers' actions and sexual immorality and temptations and mistakes and everything, were their actions written down for the sake and for the example of their descendants? Or were the fathers' actions and sexual immorality and mistakes all written down for the sake and the example of all humanity for all time to come? Mind you, humanity never even had the law that these Israelites had. So I think it's safe to say and safe to see that it makes total sense that Paul is writing to elect descendants of Abraham, the Israelites, the chosen people, the chosen ones, and he's telling them that their fathers passed through the Red Sea and were baptized into Moses. And of course, this makes perfect sense because we have Peter writing to the elect of the dispersion in all these regions, all over the known world, in his letter. And in 2 Peter chapter 3, we know he says that Paul also wrote to you, you being the elect of the dispersion whom he's writing to. He said, Paul also wrote to you in all of his epistles, speaking in them of these same things that Peter did, which clearly means that all of Paul's epistles were written to the elect Israelites dispersed among the nations. Folks, I hope you enjoyed it. Short and sweet. If you did, give it a like, a Ruski, and we'll catch you on that flip side. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.